It's still September, but these next three games in Chicago will have an October feel. It's a must sweep series for the White Sox as they play host to the AL Central leading Cleveland Guardians. The Sox are kicking things off by sending their ace, Dylan Cease, to the hill. So much is at stake for the White Sox, and it's difficult to not look too far ahead, one game at a time. Guardians, White Sox, Tuesday night on the South Side.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Sox fans, welcome to Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Sox. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Locked On White Sox. Hey, I'm your host, Nick Morawski, a lifelong diehard Chicago White Sox fan, recording this podcast just blocks from the ballpark in beautiful Bridgeport. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Really appreciate you letting me steal some of your time to talk White Sox. Locked On White Sox is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The White Sox have the best possible starters going in a must-sweep series. Cleveland made a statement against the Minnesota Twins over a 5-game span. What's left in their tank for Tuesday night? It doesn't matter how we got here. We are here, and it's time for the White Sox to take control. But you can't sweep the series if you don't win game one. State of the White Sox, they are 76-71. 4 games back in the AL Central, of course, chasing the Cleveland Guardians with 15 games left on the schedule. Sox, of course, had that off day on Monday following that series in Detroit. Sox won the series, capped it off by beating the Tigers. And under the care of Miguel Cairo, the Sox are 13-6. Playing some better baseball over the last 2-3 weeks for sure. Definitely some issues defensively, base running, some hiccups with the offense every now and then. But here we are. White Sox host the Cleveland Guardians for 3 games. It all starts Tuesday night, 7:10 Central, hoping for a packed house at 35th and Shields. I don't think this is a hot take or anything. It's simply stating the obvious. This series with Cleveland is a must-sweep series. This is the season in my mind. White Sox need the tiebreaker with Cleveland, which requires a 3-game sweep with the Guardians. And, you know, the Guardians, they're going to be finishing up with the Royals. If you look a little bit further down the schedule, Sox have got Minnesota and San Diego towards the end of our season. Not taking anything away from the Royals, but hey, Sox can take a little bit of control over that tiebreaker by getting these 3 games. Sox have to win. They just have to win, and then they need to continue to win when Detroit comes to town this Friday for a 3-game series. These 3 with the Guardians, they need to be treated like playoff games, but 1 game at a time. That's the approach. You got to think of it that way. Chicago White Sox are in this situation for a variety of reasons. Maybe it was the White Sox thinking this division would be just handed to them once again, like, of course, it was in 2021. Thinking maybe that no other AL Central team would show up, not playing with a sense of urgency as Tony La Russa relied heavily on Lurie Garcia while hiding Andrew Vaughn and playing lineup roulette for what felt like most of the first half of the season. Of course, several Sox players not living up to their potential was also a problem. while other players suffered injury after injury. There are only 3 more weeks of baseball, 15 games in total. The Sox have been playing like a completely different team. Obviously, things have changed with the leadership. Miguel Cairo has been in charge, and the offense seems to have a spark to it. More extra base hits, more home runs, and more games with multiple home runs. Sox had another multi-home run game on Sunday to finish off Detroit, and just can't afford to go quiet this week. Sox are under 500 at home. It's a ballpark that should be homer friendly for the Sox, and they need it. They absolutely need it. We know what the record is when the White Sox hit multiple home runs in a game. Looking for that early in this series on Tuesday would be very nice. It's unrealistic to ask for the Sox defense to finally tighten everything up, hit the cutoff man, limit extra base hits, and field the ball cleanly, but that is what needs to happen. Look for the Cleveland Guardians to steal a base whenever possible. They've got some speedsters and they've got some aggressive base runners. And if the Sox throw out, Andrew Vaughn in left and Gavin Sheets in right, and an AJ Pollock that, sometimes just can't cut a ball off in the alley, Cleveland will be standing on second when it should simply be just a single. Need a clean game. Sox cannot give extra outs, can't force Dylan Cease to throw more pitches than necessary. And that's, not a bad recipe for success against a Cleveland Guardians team that can be very, very pesky. The list is long when it comes to players on Cleveland's roster that have hurt the Sox this year. I'm going to tell you why the Sox can't afford to lose focus. More on that in a moment. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Create a post, then add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonMLB. That's linkedin.com/lockedonMLB to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. The list is rather lengthy. You've got Ramirez, Naylor, Jimenez, Rosario, Kwan. There are more. They have all created chaos for the White Sox this season. Jose Ramirez, he's been at it for his entire career. It'd be very interesting to see what the Sox do with certain guys in certain situations, especially Naylor. White Sox are 7-9 against the Cleveland Guardians this season. They are 2-3 at home against the Guardians. Such a huge, huge series starting Tuesday night. I was following the Cleveland Guardians Minnesota Twins game on Monday afternoon. It was on the MLB network. You had the Cleveland Guardians broadcasters, and it was a close game for a while until it wasn't. Guardians pulled away, ended up burying the Minnesota Twins, beating them 11-4. Naylor had a home run, unassisted double play. He could field his position at first base. And boy, it seems like he can be enemy one for the White Sox. Some of the things that he has done against us this year alone, Looking to be careful with him on Tuesday and throughout the series. Straw and Kwan with triples. They've got some burners, the Cleveland Guardians do. And much like some of the guys on the Tigers, as soon as that ball is hit, especially if it looks like it could be in the gap, I feel like guys like Kwan are looking at 2, definitely 3 from the get-go. So limiting them, cutting the ball off, hitting the cutoff man, not allowing Cleveland to steal an extra base on you. Rosario had a home run on Monday. He's got power. He's done damage against the Sox. It was a 5-game series that the Cleveland Guardians and Minnesota Twins were playing, and Cleveland went 4-1. Minnesota seemingly just rolled over. They are 7 games out now in the AL Central. Remember when the Minnesota Twins were up at the top and we were looking at the schedule and we're like, oh, wow, we're finishing up with the Twins, 6 games with the Twins towards the end of the season. This is going to be crazy. And the Twins fell off. They don't have the pitching. They've got some offense. They've got some young players that can hit, but the Guardians, and it wasn't easy for the Guardians. There was a game, of course, on Saturday that went 15 innings. Twins, their only win came on Sunday. So will the Guardians be physically, emotionally drained? That was a big series for them in Cleveland. Did they use up all their offense? They scored 11 runs on Monday. Are they a team that maybe like the White Sox when they score a ton of runs, a bunch of extra base hits, do they go quiet the next day? I was hoping for a close game on Monday, something that maybe went into extra innings, hoping that Cleveland's pitching would be depleted, but that did not happen. Their bullpen, really, they weren't stretched out much on Monday. I think only 2 Pensmen ended up coming out to pitch. So their Class A, their closers well rested. But Sox, they should be well rested as well with the off day, especially some of our bullpen arms. Hoping we don't need it, though, because the White Sox, they have the best possible situation right now in terms of starting pitchers for this 3-game series. You couldn't have drawn it up any better. I'm going to tell you how game 1 shapes up on Tuesday night. More on that in a moment. It's a good sign that the White Sox are not messing around when it comes to the starting pitching. These are the projected starters. Tuesday night, you've got Dylan Cease. Wednesday, Lance Lynn. And Thursday, we're hoping Johnny Cueto. He, of course, dealt with some illness over the weekend, could not go on Saturday in Detroit. They thought maybe he'd pitch on Sunday. That didn't happen. So hopefully, he's going to be in a bit of a strange situation, coming off of an illness and obviously not on his normal 5-game rest rotation. He's a veteran. He might have been here before. So we'll see how that pans out. But Dylan Cease, he is on point. He's on his normal rest. He is 14-7. He's our ace. ERA 2.16. Still chasing that Cy Young award, but after his last start against the Colorado Rockies and then what Justin Verlander did coming off of the IL for the Houston Astros, it would be a real long shot for Dylan Cease at this point. But should be a very exciting game on Tuesday. Hoping it's got that playoff atmosphere. I really do. Dylan Cease has a 2-1 record with an ERA of 2.12 and 16 strikeouts in 3 appearances against the Guardians this season. Dylan's most recent start against Cleveland was on July 24th, and it was indeed at home. He went 6 innings, sprinkled 7 hits, 0 earned runs, only 1 walk, and 4 strikeouts. Cleveland, on the other hand, will send Aaron Civale to the hill. He's 2-6 with a 5.40 ERA. Civale has only pitched 1 inning against the White Sox this season, giving up 2 hits. And the reason it was only 1 inning is he left the game injured after throwing just 20 pitches in the first inning of that Guardians 2-1 loss to the White Sox in Cleveland at Progressive Field. Aaron Civale was removed from the game with right wrist soreness and was sent for an MRI after his departure. So Civale is fresh off of the IL, and the Sox have seen him quite a bit over the last few years. Civale has a 4-3 record with an ERA of 5.00 and 36 strikeouts in 8 appearances against the White Sox in his career. Hopefully the Sox have enough video. They study that and they bring the offense somehow, some way from Sunday. And, if the home runs aren't flying, if the extra bases aren't flying, then you're going to have to play it. You're going to have to play some small ball. You're going to have to manufacture runs. The hope is that Dylan Cease, of course, has got a bounce back performance. It wasn't a great performance at all against the Rockies last week. We're hoping that Cease is dialed in, minimal damage, and it could be a close game. It's that tense, who's going to blink first type of atmosphere if it does have that playoff feel, which I'm anticipating it is. I think each of these games will, especially if the Sox can take game one. It makes game two even more intense and so forth. But one game at a time. Miguel Cairo, the leader, mentioned it after Sunday's win against Detroit. This is what he said, quote, "One game at a time. Day off on Monday, reset, rest, and go one game at a time at home against Cleveland." It's not exactly where we wanted the White Sox to be at all. Hoping that the Sox were ahead maybe by 4 games instead of behind 4 games. But it's exciting, meaningful baseball in mid to late September on the South Side. Fun stuff. I'm going to try to be at a few games during this series. Hopefully you will as well. Really appreciate you making this podcast part of your daily routine. You can find the Locked On White Sox podcast absolutely everywhere. We are on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Sox. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen. Now make your second listen the Locked On MLB podcast. MLB expert Paul Francis Sullivan brings humor, passion, and unique perspective on every team and the biggest stories around the league. Follow the #1 daily league-wide podcast, Locked On MLB, on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up on the next episode, I'll recap Dylan Cease's outing and hopefully be celebrating a White Sox winner. Really appreciate you making time for the Locked On White Sox podcast. I'm Nick Morawski, and until next time, go Sox.